Welcome back, guys. Hope you had a relaxing and good 4-day weekend. We're going to jump in for today, Tuesday the 14th. We will pick up where we left off on Thursday now. Before I dive into it, we are going to finish the notes probably tomorrow. And I know that's sneaking up on you guys, and it snuck up on me too. I've been trying to figure out how to give some type of assessment on this. So the thought that I have had is Thursday, either Thursday or Friday. I don't know which day yet. We'll definitely have our Zoom meeting on Thursday first. So maybe just do it on Friday. I'm going to just post like a paper version of the test on Google Classroom, like as a normal assignment. And then I'll have you fill it out or highlight the right answers, however you do it, but it'll be online. And I'll just have you guys fill that out. I'll give you a day or two. It's like a take-home test. Obviously open note. I'll try and ask the questions in a way to where you don't just Google them, like in a way that makes taking notes worth it. So it'll be open note and all that. Like it should be simple. Please don't ask each other or like send your copy of the test. Like, work with me here. Please don't just try and cheat the system more. This isn't going to be a big test. I'm not going to make it worth 100 points. It's not going to be like a normal test. It'll be worth more than a normal essential question would, or even the week's worth of them. But it won't be something that's going to destroy your grade if you don't do well or any of that. Right now, the whole theme of this virtual learning is to maintain the progress we're on. I'm not trying to bomb anybody's grade. I'm not trying to, make things more difficult, but I still have to be able to assess your learning. So I'll do that. But I'll talk more about that at our Zoom meeting and probably tomorrow's lecture. But today we're going to jump into a couple Supreme Court cases. They aren't, massively known. They aren't considered landmark cases, but they're very important to our current political landscape. And we start with Baker versus Carr of 1962. So if you guys know anything about elections, you know that there's voting districts. We try and draw voting districts based on, the amount of people, and basically trying to get everyone's vote equal. Our vote means the same as a vote from a person in another district. Well, back in the 60s and really any time before, there was an issue with certain districts having way more people than other voting districts. Let's say that you're voting for, I don't know, governor of the state. And we break down voting by districts. That way we can tell, people from this area feel this way and people from this area feel another way. So not every we'll break it down by county. Not every county has the same number of people in it, right? We know that. Um, but someone living in Harper County, their vote should mean just as much as someone living in Sedgwick County. But the problem is that Sedgwick County gets more state senators. They get more representation because they have more people. Well, there's a problem way back when that, especially in certain places in the South, these districts were not updated. People move all the time. And a lot of African Americans were leaving the sharecropping lifestyle, out in the boondocks, out in tiny, small rural towns, and they were moving to cities. Well, we found that in certain places in the South, these cities were not being represented as they felt they should. Counties of 500 people they had just as much influence on decisions being made as counties with thousands of people in them. So if if a city with thousands of people in it, half of which are African American, are being outvoted by small towns with a majority of them being white Southerners, then many of those African Americans' votes are going to be, negated. They're going to be outdone. So in Baker versus Carr, and this may be confusing, the Supreme Court, in Baker versus Carr, the court decides only that now the federal government has the power to redraw voting districts. That's it. They didn't make any decisions on how to redraw the districts or like what the result would be. Baker versus Carr was just the decision to give the federal government the power to redraw districts. Now, Reynolds versus Sims 2 years later was enacting Baker versus Carr. Reynolds versus Sims was a continuation of Baker versus Carr. Reynolds versus Sims redraws districts, actually redraws them in a way that gives one person one vote. So that's why if you look at a voting district map, you will see some voting districts that look really big as far as land size, and then some voting districts that look really small. Take, for example, Kansas. And I'm going to bring up a map here. So here I have a map of the voting districts of Kansas. Now, Kansas has 4 state representatives. So we get 4 districts, voting districts. And each representative is, responsible for each district. You will see that by land size, these districts are not equal at all. But by population, they're as close to equal as we can get. So you see voting district 1 is green, and it covers by far the most land. But because population is, as we know, out west is not very high, and so it's balanced out by cities like Manhattan and Salina. But that's District 1, and its population is pretty close to equal with District 2. which is most of eastern Kansas, which has Topeka and Lawrence and like Pittsburgh and uh, places like that, and Leavenworth. Voting District 3 is by far the smallest in size, but it actually does have slightly more people in it than the other districts. That's because it has Kansas City, Olathe, Overland Park, um, the biggest cities in Kansas. And then District 4, where we live, is Wichita. So that's why these districts look a little weird. We try and match up populations. So that way, each state representative has, same amount of people, same amount of responsibility, and each of the people have equal representation. Now, that word up there that you may not recognize, gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is a word that is used to describe when governments will redraw voting districts based on political leaning. It's really difficult to explain and not actually be there to show you. Basically, if you have a district, let's say there's a district of 10 people, and 6 of them are Democrat and 4 are Republican. If you were supposed to divide those 10 people into 3 voting districts, then you could, well, that wouldn't work. Let's say 12 people. You have 12 people and you need to divide them into 3 voting districts. And you've got 7 Democrats and 5 Republicans. Whereas raw numbers say Democrats should have a majority and they should be in power. You could draw up the districts to put a district of all Democrats together. So the Democrats win one district, but then the Republicans are split up to where they can win the other 2 districts. And then you have a 2-to-1 Republican victory, despite only having fewer people than the Democrats. It's a difficult situation, but that's ultimately what these court cases were trying to fight. And gerrymandering still goes on to this day for both parties. Happens all the time. It's unfortunate, but that's just what it does. So then the U.S. Passes the 24th Amendment to the Constitution in 1964, and that just purely outlaws poll taxes. We talked about poll taxes, charging someone a fee to vote, usually a fee that would make it so poor and uneducated African Americans can't vote. Well, now we have an amendment that strictly outlaws that in federal elections. Keyword there is federal. The amendment itself only outlaws poll taxes in national elections, like the president. It didn't mention anything about local elections, like governor and mayor and all that stuff. So for a couple years, southern states would still use poll taxes in local elections. In 1966, there was a separate, not an amendment, but a court mandate that outlawed poll taxes of all types. But the 24th Amendment specifically outlaws federal poll taxes. So civil disobedience is a theme throughout this entire chapter. It's a theme for the entire movement. So civil disobedience is purely just breaking the law or causing a disturbance in order to get attention for your cause. That's it. It doesn't have to be breaking the law, but that's kind of the common way to get the attention for your cause. But it's causing some sort of public inconvenience in order to get people on your side or to force government change. It's happened all throughout our nation's history, but this is the most well-known era for it. So forms of civil disobedience can be violent or nonviolent. Luckily, the civil rights movement was mostly nonviolent protest. Some examples of nonviolent protest would be boycotts, which happen quite often. Boycotts are swearing off the use of any kind of product or good or service because you disagree with that business's, basically you disagree with anything of that business. Like African Americans boycotting the buses in Montgomery, not using them, not giving them their service. When you don't give them your service, or when you don't give them your business, they lose money. So they are more likely to change in order to appease whatever it is you're fighting for. People boycott restaurants if they feel they've been treated poorly or if the restaurant stands for something that they don't appreciate. So yeah, boycotts happen pretty often. Hunger strikes, those weren't super common in the U.S. during this era. They happen, but the most famous hunger strikes are those done by Indians when fighting for their freedoms from the British government. When I say Indian, I mean actual Indian, people living in India. Those are the only real Indians. Like Gandhi. Gandhi was very known for his use of hunger strikes. Now you might think, what does that do to get attention? It just makes you hungry. Well, you're not just sitting in your living room not eating. It's usually joined with some other kind of civil disobedience to bring attention to your cause. Petitions are a widely known or widely used form of civil disobedience and nonviolent protest. Basically writing your local government or even that federal government, writing them and getting support. That's why people walk the streets and get signatures for a petition, because if you can get enough signatures, that shows the government just how much support your movement has and how important it is. And the government is there to work for the people. So if the people want something, then in their power is in numbers and they can get it accomplished through petitions. So marches and demonstrations, again, another popular use during this time. I'll move that. The March on Washington, the march from Tennessee through Alabama by James Meredith and his group. Another just inconvenience for people, whether you're marching down the middle of the street or you're taking business away. Just bringing the public in, getting as many people as possible to gather and bring about publicity and attention. And strikes, refusing to work. This has been, that may be the oldest form of nonviolent protest, at least in our country. Strikes have been going on forever and they always will. Workers' unions, workers that don't feel like they're being either paid correctly or treated well, they can stop working, and you can't be fired for going on strike. Legally, you are protected in that case. But that doesn't mean your job is safe. You know, they could hire someone else to do a similar job to yours and then slowly force you out. But it's a complicated system, but these are all forms of nonviolent protest, which is a form of civil disobedience. So, and these all get used. They were used a lot during the civil rights movement. They're used a lot during any era of American history, and they will continue to be used. You know, nonviolent protest, thankfully, was much more popular than violent protest during this era. It could have been a lot worse. It could have been a lot more confrontational and deadly. Luckily, it was not. So our central question is simply, what is civil disobedience? That's it. What is civil disobedience? I want my definition, not Google's. I made a whole slide just with the definition. So it should be pretty simple. So that'll be it for today. We will have we'll have one final lecture tomorrow. And then Zoom meeting Thursday, I'll tell you what we're going to do for as far as like assessment. And then we will go from there. So Thursday's Zoom meeting mandatory. I want everybody there. I want everybody to hear what the plan is, and so that way everybody's on the same page. So please be sure you can make it. It still won't be all that long. I'll try and keep it short and sweet, and we'll get that stuff taken care of, and then we'll just keep moving on. So, all right, guys, thanks for tuning in. We will talk tomorrow. Have a good one.